So the challenge was to talk about the importance of keeping and preserving the oral and the written testimonies. I changed it a little bit because the matter is to change to preserve our archives, and we need to know what about we are dealing with. I begin by illustrating briefly some characteristics of what we call archival documents. This will help us to understand some aspects and requirements that are relevant in their management, preservation, and access. So, archival documents.
Antonio, I'm sorry. I'm
Yes?
sorry. Were you referring that you have a PowerPoint presentation? If it is that, we are not saying that.
No.
No, we are not saying your PowerPoint if you have it. If you don't have it, it's okay. You just can go ahead and talk to us. But if you have your PowerPoint, we are not seeing it.
But I have it.
There is an option down that you have share your screen in green.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Seems
Now
it's working. Sorry,
yes.
it's the first time I do this.
We can see it now. Thank you.
I must do this. So I was talking that archival documents are documents produced and received by an individual or collective person in the exercise of its functions and activities. So the archive or fund are these kind of documents, regardless of their form of support, that are organic, produced by someone. The archival document is produced to be an evidence, a proof of that activity, record that allows justifying the rights and duties of an entity in its life and relations, either among individuals or organizations, but with, let's say, everyone in all the world. It is also a record of a will, of a position on a certain subject or fact. And human beings are doing this for a long time, since the Sumerians, let's say, thousands and thousands years before Jesus Christ and before the Greeks and the Romans. Archives are humanity's oldest memory services or institutions, sources for creating identities of human communities and for producing collective memory and culture. They guarantee the rights of their producers, and on the other hand, they allow us to learn about the past of each person and each organization. So we have talked about this before. The availability of information from our archives, even with the necessary controls, you must think about the personal data, allow the enrichment of relations with other communities and groups, and contribution to the common good. We must therefore take care of the archives. That's, I think, clear for everyone here. So it seems to me important to highlight some important characteristics for the adequate preservation of and the use of these resources. And I do it in a single way with no much more detail. Any resource and its specificities regarding its physical management and management of its content. The information, the core of our concern, is the information that is inscribed in a support like paper. This is what gives the document its value. The variety of media and documents formats are richness, but also an additional requirement in their management and conservation. The preservation of media requires specific environmental and handling conditions. This is the easier part of knowing how to do, especially when it comes to paper. We know very well how to manage paper documents and how to preserve them, guaranteeing their authenticity. However, digital. Yes.
I'm sorry, Antonio, for interrupting. Can you please talk a little bit slower so the translators can do their job? I'm sorry for interrupting. Okay. Thank you very much.
I try. However, I was saying, with digital formats, which can jump from one support to another and get lost in the clouds, we have more difficulty in managing and ensuring access to the information they contain and to its authenticity. The information stored in digital environments always requires a mediating instrument for its decoding and reading. The supports and equipment, the hardware and software, are becoming obsolete every day. forcing the migration of the files to new formats and supports. Moreover, the digital document deceives us regarding its authenticity. For example, if you saved an email in PDF format, that's a format accepted for adequate to the digital preservation, no one guarantees that this file actually reproduces the original email. It may have been created by another application, and therefore the information presented does not guarantee by itself its authenticity and conformity to the original document. In this context, archive documents or records have requirements very similar to books in libraries and even museum pieces. However, the information recorded in them has specificities that differentiated them and require a specific technical treatment, something more complex than making a library catalog or a museum inventory. Archival documents are generally unique, originals. There may be some copies, but usually they are originals. And their implicit purpose is to serve their producer, guaranteeing the authenticity of the information they contain. If an original document is lost, there will not be a copy to replace it. And if there is, it will not replace the legal validity of the original. Another relevant aspect in these documents, may contain sensitive confidential information, namely personal data or strategic information relevant to the organization that produces it, which does not normally happen in books and published. So I'm going to give some notes on the archival treatment, just to sensibilize all of us for this kind of treatment. The other aspect of archival processing deals with the content of the documents, the information. How do we manage it? Archives are not organized by themes, subjects, or any other criteria other than their producer. Documents are grouped by the activities and functions of the producer, that say the activities and functions to which they refer. Thus, there are two principles that are fundamental in the treatment of an archive. The principle of provenance, which points us to consider in the same fund only the documents from one producer, based on the definition I mentioned at the beginning. And the principle of respect for the original order of the documents, that is, the way the producer organizes documentation when it exists. We may have to recreate it considering the natural order of the production of the documents. The archival treatment gathers under a single fund the documents of a producer. However, in our organizations, we may have documents that belong to several producers, but that we want to archive, to keep with us. For example, documents produced by some important personality or by some previous collective that was related to our movement, but that in the meantime has ceased its activity. This documentation must constitute for its producer a fund or an archive. In the archives, we do not describe the documents alone to produce a catalog. We insert their description in a multi-level description of the archive. And here I can present briefly the levels that we used to consider in the description of an archive. So we describe the global font, the scope and content of the person that produces the archive, and the documentation that we have in that fund. We have the sections that represent an organic or a functional structure of the entity. So the Secretariat, General Secretary of the Pax Romana could be one section for each General Secretary. And then we have series, and series is a group of documents, a set of documents that have the same function, that refers to a specific task. And then we describe the documents itself. And documents could be described as a composite document, as a process. That means a set of different documents that were used for something special, for something unique, or can be described by itself. So our groups and movements should seek support. This information structure, this multi-level description, allows to provide the user, either internal or external, a researcher, for example, with the context of the documents. Making this information available through a search interface on the internet, it will allow each archival unit to be associated with its digital representation and offer to the consultation online, on what we wish to call a virtual reading room. Our groups and movements should seek support and collaboration to enable the organization and description of their archives, their storage and preservation, and, where possible, access by others who need to consult them for some justifiable purpose. To help give such archival care and the absence of human resources in that area, especially if it is a small group of movement, some manuals may be available from archives and other entities concerned with archival activity and management of archival information. Here I put an example of a manual for non-archivists, a manual for archives of cultural, recreational, and sport associations produced by the Portuguese authorities for archives. So I can probably show. No, it's a little complicated. Well, if I have time, I'll show it at the end of the presentation. Usually, or at least in many cases, public archives have this competence to support or to guide external entities, even private ones, in the preservation of their archives. And who knows, among us, there are other friends with these competencies that may help locally or establish a support network for that purpose. So that's the last point. And what happens if a group or organization is unable to take custody of its archive? As long as an organization exists, whether large or small, old or new, it should custody its archive. A functioning entity should never give its archive to another institution because it loses its legal ownership and control. Thus, when a group or organization is unable to take custody of its archive, particularly because of the volume it represents, it may choose a custodian for the archive. This choice should take into account the capacity of the entity to process and to make the documentation available for consultation, but also to guarantee the integrity of the archive, the protection of the interest of the movement or group that produces it, and the capacity to maintain it in the long term. The producer of the archive, let's say the movement or the group, should be assured that they will have access to the documents when they need them. It should establish rules, permissions, and authorizations regarding the use of the documents and the information they contain. They should not accept inadequate technical treatment of the archive, either its physical components or its intellectual components. Therefore, it should monitor the archival treatment process and the actions that may harm the archive. For example, not allowing the elimination of documents just because they have been digitized. And ensure that the archives will not be transferred to another organization without their authorization or the establishment of a deposit agreement. There are also other aspects that should be considered in the institutional framework of an archive deposit. For example, given Pax Romana status as a worldwide church organization, the archive of its movements, MEC and MIG, its organic structure, let's say, top-level structure, should be kept in the Vatican archive or an equivalent archive. But it no longer makes sense that archives of this local structure of the affiliated or associated movement should have the same destination. Archives should remain as far as possible in the territorial space where the entity that produces them is located. The movement's archives from one country should be preserved and accessible in some archive in that country. Those in charge of the movement or group will find the most suitable archive institution, whether it is an archive of the church, a diocese, or a religious congregations. But it could also be an university archive or a public archive. I insist, an entity in full exercise of its functions, that is alive, must take direct care of the archive. So I remain at your disposal for any questions you may have during this webinar and possibly in future contacts. I have some references. I don't know if I have time to pass them and make a brief comment. So that's the link for this Portuguese guides. Sorry, I didn't found anyone. I had no enough time to look for other manuals, and also links for the International Council on Archives for the section on for archives and safe traditions, and another link for the ICA resources, different resources that you can find there. I highlighted the general international standard archival description, which is for technicians, but it's accessible for everyone and could help people keeping care of the archives and to be introduced on that. The Universal Declaration on Archives, it's interesting for understanding the role of the archives. And these last two ones, an electronic archival document and book, it's for archivists to be sure, but it's if you have someone that will have expertise also in informatics and system management, they will be able to look for it and to look how they must care the electronic documents. And last one, it's an old book. It's in Portuguese. Sorry. For digital preservation, it's good for people that are not an expert on these areas. So thank you for your attention, and thank you for hearing me. And that's all.
Gracias, Antonio. Thank you very much, Antonio. Can you please stop sharing your screen?
Yes, I'm looking for it. It changed. Okay. No. Okay. It seems so.
Thank you very much.